Hey everyone, welcome back. Let's take a look at where we're at so far. I mean, I feel pretty good about the app thus far. I mean, I think it's actually starting to look like something, right? Like we have a scoreboard and things are pretty close to working. Like we have a lot of functionality and I think it looks pretty cool. A lot better than the basic text version. So I think what we really want to accomplish in this video is we need to start updating those scores, right? These scores right now are like hard coded, the 000. So we need to have a way to kind of update these. Where'd they go? Have a way to update these. Like again, they're just set to 0, so they won't change at the moment. And a lot of that's going to be through some JavaScript. I think we also want to add a reset button. I think that'll probably be one of the other things we want to accomplish in this video is find a way to change the scores and then find a way to reset the scores. So I think that'll kind of be the gist of that. I think first and foremost, let's get some references to these elements in our JavaScript. So kind of did some of that legwork already. We have this win count, loss count, and tie count. So we're going to use those IDs as variables in our JavaScript file and be able to dynamically update them. So we're going to follow the same pattern we've done here before. We're going to give ourselves another global variable here. So I'm going to call this one, I don't know, win text. Sure, win text. We're going to set this again equal to document.getElementById, by ID. And I just copied it. So we're going to get one for win count. And I'm going to do the same thing for a loss text. And this is, what the heck is this? Ties, right? Yeah, tie text. So that would make this one loss count and tie count. Yeah. So that looks good. Let me just, as always, let me just log these real quick. I want to make sure that I actually have the variables I think I have, so I don't get too far down and then realized, oh, wait a minute, like this, like I know I'll mess that up. So that should be text, which makes that text. So like little stuff like that would definitely jam me up down the road, and it will take me just a minute to catch it now and save me a lot of headaches. So let me save that. Now I have 3 new variables: win text, loss text, and tie text. And they're references to these elements that are on the HTML page. So I just want to console log them out and make sure I actually have them. So let's go back and I'll refresh and here. So I have them. I know we can't see them. So like they're currently displayed. It's currently displayed none. Doesn't mean that they're not there. It's just we can't see them. So we do have the references, win count, loss count, and tie count. So that looks good. I'm going to delete these because I don't care anymore. I know they're there, so I'll move on. But what I do want to do is what I want to do is I want to initialize these values. So like when I start the game, I want to initialize these values. So I think I'm going to make a new function. So this is game start. So I think I'm going to make a new function here. And I'm going to give ourselves another document block here. Oops. And what I want to do is I'm going to have a function that sets the win, loss, and tie values to 0. So in order to do that, I have a reference to these HTML elements, but I want to store their values as a variable as well. So we actually need 3 more variables. So we have these variables here. These are all like HTML variables. We're going to call these like global HTML variables. And I mean, these can be together, but just to keep us organized, I'm just going to call these like other global variables. I don't know what else might go here, but just so we're looking in the right spot. So I'm going to say var wins, yeah, I think it's fine, equals 0. var losses equals 0 and var ties equals 0. So now I have three variables, and I'm going to initialize them to be numbers set at 0. And that way, when I call this function that initializes the values, I can tell it to set the value of these HTML elements equal to the value of these variables in my JavaScript code. Right now, it won't actually do anything different than what we currently have, because again, we currently have them hard-coded here, right here. But in the future, what we're going to want to do is obviously increase those numbers in the JavaScript. So I kind of need to have a reference to it. So this is kind of a little bit of plumbing, again, a little legwork that we're doing just to help us out. So I'm actually going to move this to here just to get that, be consistent with my stuff. Now you get them see me mess with some spacing just to keep our code well formatted. I turned off a lot of my extensions, so I'm doing a lot of this stuff manually that I don't. So that looks good. So let's get back to this function. So we want to write a function that sets the win, loss, and tie values to 0. So it's going to be pretty easy. Now that I have the variables, I want to set the win text, the value of win text, that HTML element. I want to set the value of that equal to 0. So we have a couple different ways to do this. So again, first I'm going to write a new function. I'm just going to call it like initialize scores. It's not going to take any arguments. And all it's going to do is it's going to say winText dot, you can do a couple things here. I think we've shown text content, I think is the one that we've shown so far in class. There's another one, like inner HTML. For the sake of conversation, they're going to do similar things, but let's stick with text content for now. I'm going to set that equal to wins. And I'm going to do the same for the loss text. Text content is going to be equal to losses. And I'm going to set tie text content equal to ties. So this function is going to do all this, but I'm not actually calling this function anywhere yet. Like I just wrote it. So it's not doing anything at all for me, which is fine. So, again, the thought process here is the concept of setting, like initializing the values. In my head, I can see that I want to do this like as soon as the game starts. But I talked earlier, I want to put in a reset button that's going to like reset these scores for me if I decide, I'm having bad luck, I have too many losses, whatever. I can hit the reset button. So I might want to reset these scores more than one time, and I may want to do it for different reasons. So taking that logic and putting it in a function is definitely a good use case for writing a function. This is, again, not repeating myself. I don't want to write this code more than once. So I'm writing it once, and I will use the code. I will use the function multiple times. So this is going to be pretty easy. All I'm going to do is JavaScript files, they load top to bottom, right? So when this JavaScript file loads, it's going to settle these variables for me. It's going to see this function, but it's not going to call it. It just knows that this function exists. It's going to know that this function exists, and then it's going to set up this like listener that's going to listen for a key event. What I can also do is at the end of the file, I can just say initialize scores. So whenever I want to call a function, I just give it the name, and I use these parentheses. If it took any arguments, like if there was something in here that it was looking for, I would also want to put them in here. But again, this is empty. It doesn't take any arguments, so I can simply call this function just by writing initialize scores. So I'm going to save this. The last thing is let's delete our static content, which is the zeros that are in here. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to save this, and just to demonstrate, I'm going to, so we're all on the same page, I'm actually just going to comment this out for a minute. So I'm never going to call this function. So in theory, when we go back to our HTML code on the browser in Chrome, we should still see these p tags, but those numbers should be gone. Like there should be no zeros. So I'm going to refresh this. No errors, which is good. A lot of coding. And kind of hard to test until we actually got a bunch of stuff done. But I'm going to press R. So you can see I have wins, but that 0 that was there before is now gone, which is what I expected to see. So if we comment, if we comment this back in and save it, now when this file loads, the last thing it'll do is I'll call this function, which is right here, and it will update these values. So let's see if this works. I'm gonna refresh it, press R. Cool. So now I'm seeing those values here set to 0. Now again, like this might have been a lot of work to get basically the same effect, but those values are getting updated into the JavaScript now, not in static HTML. We did lose the bold that we had on here. We had a strong tag around this. We'll go back to that in 1 second, but just to demonstrate again, like if I change these values in here, like I make this like 10 and like 33 and I don't know, 4 and save it and refresh it, like you'll see that those values are being set from the JavaScript. They're not coming from the HTML. So that is very, very cool. Yeah, very, very cool stuff. So let's change these back to 0, and that's going to make us put us in a very good spot as we start keeping track of scores in these next couple videos. So let's save that. Let's save that, and let's go back to the index.html. What the hell did I mess up here? So here's our span. Okay. I'm not sure if you saw it as you're watching this video. Maybe you've seen this whenever we made this like 2 videos ago or whatever, but we're setting the text content of the win count. And that's basically going to erase everything in between this set of brackets and this set of brackets, which is going to lose our strong, which is not what we wanted. So what the hell did I just do? What we have to do is we actually just have to move this strong outside of the span. So it'll actually be here. You get to watch me make a bunch of typo changes real quick. But yeah, I mean, that's a simple error. Like these things happen. It's not a huge deal. It wasn't breaking at all to my code. Like you saw, nothing actually went wrong with it. I just lost that strong, that basically that bold on those numbers, which is kind of the effect that I wanted. I wanted those to pop out a little bit more than just the win text. So we'll just fix this, do the last one, strong. Let's get rid of this closing tag, cut it out, delete these. Come on, this is hard to follow. I think that looks good. Hopefully I didn't lose anybody with all that, but now our strong tags are outside of the span, not inside the span. So if we go back and refresh this and hit R, yeah, now I got that bold. That looks good. Super bold. Whoa. And there's our responsive design that Bootstrap gives us, that if we're on mobile, this is automatically collapsing down to, the stacked layout, which you can argue might actually be the wrong view, but whatever. Okay. I think that looks good. I think the last thing that we want to do, which should hopefully be relatively quick, is I want to set up a reset button. It's going to be pretty easy. I'm going to go back to Bootstrap and go to Get Started and go to Components and go to Buttons. And I want a button, I don't know, maybe like this red danger button, because I don't think that should be something that we should be jumping all over, but we're going to reset the scores, which is kind of like reset the game. So actually it's going to copy their code. It's kind of exactly what I want. I'm going to put that button right underneath the score. It's going to be type button danger. And instead of saying danger, I'm just going to say like reset score. And save that. Let's go back to our app and refresh it and look at our scoreboard. Yeah, so now I got a cool button. It says reset score. It doesn't do anything. And to be fair, even if it was doing something, the scores are already 0. So we probably won't actually get the benefits of this button until later on. But let's at least set it up for now. So we'll go back to the JavaScript. Before we do that, let's put an ID on here because we're going to need to get this element. And let's just call this, reset button. Pretty intuitive. We'll go back to our JavaScript. We need to add a new variable. So just like before, we're going to call this, var. Do we do RPS reset button or RPS button? Let's call it like RPS reset button, just to be consistent. And we'll do get element by ID, and that was reset button. And just notice I did these as win count, whatever. If you want to change this, like maybe this should be win dash count. And you'd have to change it on the HTML too, just to be consistent, but it's not a big deal. Clearly it works, but wasn't really being consistent there. Either way, I have a reference to this HTML element here, RPS reset button. And then all we want to do now is we're going to do a new event listener. So we're going to add another comment block here. And what we want to do is we want to add an event listener to our reset button when the user clicks it. So this is something that we really haven't covered. And I'm going to kind of just put in here and not spend a ton of time on it. But what we want to do here is anytime a user clicks the button, we want to call this initialize scores function. So anytime they hit the reset button, it'll reset the scores. The way we do that is we can target that element, which I think I copied, yep, which is RPS reset button. And I can do something, there's a method that I can hang off of this, and I can do something called a add event listener. So that's a method that exists on these HTML elements. And there's a lot of events that you can listen to. If we go to, change this, let's go to like MDN event. Yeah, I think I showed this on Wednesday's class. There's a lot of events that we can listen for. The one I want to listen for is a mouse event. And that mouse event is here, is click. So I want to listen to this click event. And the way I can do that is I can just pass to this event listener. It's going to look for two things. It's going to listen for a type of event. It's also going to look for a function to fire when it hears that event. So I'm going to tell it to listen to the click event. And when it hears that event, call initialize scores. And again, it's looking for a function reference here. So I'm not actually going to call the function. When this click event happens, it'll call the function for me. So, and let's just put I forgot to document this. Let's just put something in here that says something like, call this function as the file loads to initialize the scores. So on our reset button, which is a reference to this variable reset button, which is that reset button in the HTML, we're going to add an event listener. The event listener that we're going to listen for is the click event. And when we hear that click event, we're going to fire the initialize scores function, which is this function here, which will reset my score values to 0. So you can already see the benefit of writing this function once. Had I not made this a function, I would have had to have this logic here, down here, when we call it, when we start it, and then again, I'd have to have that same logic in this reset button function. So these types of things might not be extremely intuitive now. Kind of, again, taking advantage of these videos to show some things that we didn't have a chance to cover in class, and we will continue to do, but working to kind of demonstrate not repeating yourself here. So I'm going to save this and go back. Again, when we go back to our game, there's really not going to be anything that you're going to notice here. Like I'm going to hit this reset button and nothing's actually happening. But these values are being updated. If there was a number in here, which, in the next 1 or 2 videos, we'll start keeping track of the score, this reset score button would be updating those values and changing them back to 0. So pretty cool stuff. I think probably we're finally at the end of like all our plumbing, all of our setup, and we can finally actually start coding the game. Like, if a user presses rock, what the hell actually happens? So a lot of work, we're probably almost an hour of videos in, and we're finally going to get to the meat of the project. So we'll really kick that off in the next video, and I hope to see you there.